So 15 years ago, you would have found me painting idealized waterscapes along the banks of Chicago's many waterways. These days, I work on location at a wastewater treatment plant, making art about the miracle of cleaning water making clean water from sewage. Learning about this highly technical process of wastewater treatment has given me the opportunity to use my art to educate communities about a mostly hidden industry. It's an industry that resides at the intersection of public health, engineering, and natural processes. My project is called Manufactured River, and most often when I explain to people that I'm making art about wastewater treatment, what they really want to know is why would I trade working in an environment like this, which is the Chicago Canal in the height of summer, or this, which is on the banks of the Des Plaines River near my home. Why would I trade a working environment that looks like that for this? What I want to tell people is that I'm following water, literally. And what happened was I became entranced with the idea of finding out what the real story of water was, not just the idealized waterscapes. Let's see this. So my connection to water is twofold. Early in the 2000s, I was painting these impressionistic waterscapes, and I was focusing on the idealized landscapes. And what I would do is deliberately edit out things like parking lots and buildings and telephone poles, because I was trying to show a more rural waterway. This is, what's happening? Something's happening. I can't squeeze this, I guess. So this is Thatcher Woods, which has a pond near it that's really near that Des Plaines River Trail that I hike every day. This is the underpass at Lake Street for the Des Plaines River, and this is a park at Zion Park, which is in the northeast corner of Illinois. I guess I'm squeezing it or something. I need to advance when I don't need to. I didn't realize this at the time, but I was beginning to form a deep attachment to water. Early in the project, I teased out the course of the Des Plaines River and traced it all the way back to its headwater in Racine, Wisconsin. And at the time, I didn't understand that headwaters are really like basically very large, shallow land bowls. And this one is tipped up so that the water can flow either east to Lake Michigan or west into the Mississippi River. Understanding how even one river related to the hydrology of the region helped me appreciate the very real power of gravity. It was shortly after this pilgrimage to Racine, Wisconsin that my husband and I purchased our first canoe, the Leaky Cauldron. And we haul our canoe all over area waterways in the Midwest. We've canoed in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We've strapped the canoe on the car and driven all the way to Nova Scotia. And one time in a fit of folly, we even launched down by Starved Rock and navigated among all the commercial traffic on the river of the Illinois River till we decided, well, wait a minute, this wasn't such a prudent trip, and pulled out. So this is what I affectionately call my floating studio, and anytime I can ask my husband here to solo paddle, this is what I'm doing in the bow of the boat. This is race day for the Des Plaines Canoe Marathon. It is a form of organized chaos of the morning before when you get ready to launch. And in 2008, we did our first marathon, and we were actually quite proud of ourselves for just finishing. So one day while we were canoeing on the Chicago Canal, we happened to see this beautiful Sepa station, and Sepa is short for Side Stream Elevated Aeration Pool Station. And it didn't look like any ordinary water fountain that I had ever seen before, and the structure nagged at me. And I wondered who built it and why. Now, I have to admit that as an artist, ignorance is my best friend. If I had known what kind of technical and artistic and scientific adventure I was going to go on learning about this Sepa station and where it led and all the answers, I probably would have chickened out, because it's turned out to be quite a complicated story. Growing up, I was always interested in the creative end of things. Like many creative people, I was intimidated by math and science. And if I had known then that I could learn math and science with art, I would have probably paid much more attention to my science classes. I was the oddball child growing up in a family that worshiped words. From an early age, I was interested in visual expression, but it has taken me forever to figure out exactly how I want to work, and I call myself the latest of late bloomers. From the outside, my creative path looks very circuitous and illogical. I studied dance with a former Rockette. I studied fashion design and worked in that field for a number of years. I returned as a mature student to get a degree in fine arts, and I teach at Columbia College today. A defining moment came for me when I invented an artist residency for the Oak Park Police Department. I learned so many things about law enforcement that were not portrayed in the public media that I wanted to use my art to bring these quiet stories of heroism to the people who were served by law enforcement. That was the beginning of my artist, activist career. I knew that the best fit for me was to combine my art skills with community activism and choose issues that I really cared about. So I don't want to talk too much about this project because it's a whole separate story in itself, but I wanted to show you a few of the art pieces that came out of this project because I was learning a whole different visual vocabulary from the one I was using in my waterways project. So I used paper and ink and language because that's so important to law enforcement. So the materials were very important. But you can see my work made a radical U-turn. So getting back to wastewater treatment, I knew that if I wanted to portray the real story of water, I had to roll up my sleeves and literally do my homework. I've attended numerous seminars, I've talked to scientists, engineers, and operators. I've read lots of books and articles, and I didn't just want to portray the surface details of wastewater treatment. I wanted my art to capture the science and the spirit of the industry. Some of you may know this person. Meeting the right person at the right time is an unexpected gift for anyone. This is Dick Lanyon. He's the retired executive director of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. They are the folks that treat our water in Cook County. I met him early in the project at a seminar, and within 5 minutes of talking to him, he said, fine, I'm in, I'm on board, I'll help you with the project. And not knowing Dick, I had no idea what I was in for. But he was really committed to helping me get the project out, not only in the community, but to wastewater professionals. And he helped set up a meeting so that I could participate and show my work at WaterCon, where I met Greg Swanson, who is the director of the Moline Water Utility. He's been instrumental in helping me to get my work into the WEFTEC conference that's going to be next month in Chicago at McCormick Place. If any of you want to come, I can arrange for you to get in. So I call him my fairy god brother. His friendship has been an incredible gift. There are easier ways to make art than working with a very large governmental organization. It took me over a year to secure permission to work in the Stickney Reclamation Facility. I had to pitch my idea to administrators, elected officials, plant personnel, and also Homeland Security keeps a very tight watch on wastewater treatment facilities. I later found out that the only reason I was even allowed to pitch the idea in the first place was because I had included this really glowing letter of recommendation from Chief Tanksley. And I guess they figured if I could run around the police station and be trusted, I could be trusted in a wastewater treatment plant. So combining my art and wastewater treatment was both a visual and an intellectual challenge. Working in this particular way with a large technical industry requires focus, endurance, and intense curiosity. It can be intimidating to walk into a large industrial complex. I'd never worked in a place where I needed a hard hat and ear protection. It was like walking into a foreign land and learning a foreign language. In this case, it was the language of science. So yeah, that's the Stickney plant. So at first I was really overwhelmed by how much I did not know. This is the aerial view of the Stickney plant. It's huge. But my usual response to any challenge in life is to sit down and draw, to make art. Bit by bit, I acquired enough understanding of the activated sludge process to begin working on that part of the project. My first big creative breakthrough came when I dug into the microbiology of the process and discovered great joy and information learning about the microbes that clean our wastewater. This was a really exciting moment for me. All of a sudden, I felt like my art had opened the science door. So I'm going to share 3 things with you today, and 3 concepts about wastewater treatment, and show you the art that I made from these 3 parts of the project. So the first part is the microbiology of the activated sludge process, the plant infrastructure, and a little bit of the hydrology of the system, and also the value of something called biosolids. So starting with the microbes, What is the activated sludge process? This is the heart of the wastewater treatment process right here, and it occurs in the aeration tanks of the plant. I'm just going to show you what an empty one looks like. This is about 2 stories deep. They're huge. I think they're 720 feet long, and the water has to make passes through 4 tanks in order to complete the activated sludge process. So engineers, scientists, and operators have duplicated what nature uses to clean our freshwater streams and lakes. What takes days in nature is condensed into mere hours in the plant. In the aeration tank, there is a Shakespearean drama that occurs as armies of microbes live and die and vie for dominance. As the water flows through the treatment plant, microbes are concentrated in these aeration tanks where they clean billions of gallons a day. There's a lot of people in Chicago, so there's a lot of waste going through there. So where do all these microbes come from? In my ignorance, I asked scientists early in the process, well, what do? Do you just go to the microbe store and buy a bag of microbes and dump them into the process? What they told me was that the microbes arrive at the plant in the sewage because they come from our guts. These are microbes that have lived in our guts. We have evolved with microbes. We have an interdependent relationship with them. What we think of as waste is their buffet. And during the mid-1800s, epidemics of cholera and typhoid would rip through cities. At this time, scientists believed that disease was spread through the air. They called it a miasma and felt it came from rotting vegetation. Dr. John Snow in London proved to even the most skeptical physicians of his day that these diseases were waterborne. His discovery of the connection between drinking water, human waste, and microbes sparked a sanitation revolution in the mid-1850s. This is a revolution that has saved more public lives than any other medical or any other public health initiative. This is more lives than the invention of penicillin, the invention of vaccines, or any cancer treatment or whatever. It's just been an unbelievable boon to human life. Since we're talking about this Shakespearean drama, I wanted to introduce some of the microbial characters to you. So the arc of the microbial life in the aeration tank is this. Bacteria dominate in the beginning of the process. When they begin to die and use up resources, then protozoa are ascendant. And then after that, the metazoa come and clean up the last of the mess. Bacteria are the smallest microbe in the whole process. This is 0041, the 021N, they're all different species. And this is Vegetoa. And early in the process, the bacteria are in a huge race to eat our waste, use up oxygen, and form chains to conserve energy towards the end of the process. So at this point, some of the protozoa become ascendant in the process. And there aren't a lot of protozoa in the cleaning process, but what happens is when operators see that the bacteria are dying and the protozoa are becoming more abundant, they know that the process is working correctly. So this is a stalked ciliate. And then this is a metazoa. The metazoa are the largest of the microbes in the process. Does anybody watch or listen to Science Friday? Is anybody a fan? Yay! Do you know Flora's video pick of the week? Okay, well last March, Flora's video pick of the week was on tartergrade, like the world's cutest protozoa. It's adorable. What I found out from Flora's video was that these creatures can live at sub-zero temperatures. They can also survive for years without food. They are awesome survivalists. After learning about these facts and realizing that all of us depend on the services of many technical experts every day, I wanted to make art that would shake up people's complacency and help communities understand that water professionals are environmental and public health heroes. So getting down to the business of making art, I had to combine what I was learning in the industry with my skill as an artist. Many artists use oil paint, watercolor, and other traditional materials. When I work, I want my media to reinforce the message in the art, so the materials that I use for each project are really important. They support the subject, they magnify the meaning, but more importantly, they help me establish a relationship with the material I'm working on. I also wanted to figure out a way in this project to have the least amount of distance between the viewer and the art. This project serves an educational purpose as well as an aesthetic one. Water is an intimate substance. We drink in it, we bathe in it, we cook it, we use it sacramentally. All of us use textiles every day and are accustomed to choosing it to reflect our mood or make our lives more beautiful. So I thought that using textiles would provide an instant, even if unconscious, connection between the viewer and the art. My color choice is important as well. The colors that I ultimately chose were red, yellow, and blue, and those of you who are artists in here know that those three are primary colors. They're the colors from which all other colors are developed. And because water is primary, I'm leaning towards a primary color scheme in my work. Also, in a wastewater treatment plant, scientists, engineers, operators, and tradespeople all work side by side. My use of materials reflects this diversity. The textiles I use are both substantial and ethereal, expensive and common. The art is also mounted on a workmanlike canvas or denim. Again, I want to show the connection between the waste makers, all of us, and the waste cleaners. Some of them are here with us today. I experimented with a lot of hand processes, things that take a long time. So embroidery and beading, these are insanely tiny seed beads, and piecing. This sort of surface embellishment has historically been reserved for royalty and the wealthy. Using these labor-intensive techniques to express my ideas, I'm reinforcing the underlying message that the subject of wastewater, treated wastewater and the people whose job it is to clean it up is valuable. Mounting the richly embellished surface on canvas is another way to show that ultimately this is about work. So this is a page from my sketchbook, one of the tidier ones I might add. Artists draw for two main reasons. They draw for observation or they draw for invention. My sketchbooks were a useful testing ground for uniting the science that I was learning and experimenting with how to visually express my ideas. For example, as I was researching the physical characteristics and behavior of microbes, I was also messing around with possible color choices and materials. This was when I started ripping up bits of fabric and combining them playfully to express some of those bacterial chains that I was observing. Many artists have beautiful sketchbooks that are wonders of page design and perfection. I have a more blue-collar approach to my sketchbook. Some of them are even missing their covers because I kick them around so much. But really they are uncensored and spontaneous, and they show the kind of joy and enthusiasm of discovery. This was the first piece that I completed. This is Filamentous bacteria type 914. This was one of the most startlingly beautiful of the microbes. It survives in a low oxygen environment. What this microbe has the ability to do is take up sulfur dioxide, strip out the oxygen, and what's left behind in its body is a sparkly little bit of sulfur. So that sparkly little bit of sulfur was actually the inspiration point. And I made the sequence on here with gold paint, cutting them up and sewing those little bits of sequins on there. I had so much fun doing that first piece. This is Nostocoida limicola 2, which is not to be confused with Nostocoida limicola 1 or 3, which look very different. Nostocoida limicola 2 reminded me of those pop beads that my daughter played with when she was a little girl. And although you can't see it, the item that's forming the circles are price tags, those metal-rimmed price tags. That's yet another subtle way for me to show that cleaning our wastewater costs money. It takes money to invest in infrastructure, and it's something that we all need to be thinking more about. This is a detail from a rather large 60 or 66-inch piece called Beggiatoa. This is another one of those microbes that functions in a low oxygen environment and uptakes oxygen out of sulfur dioxide, so it glitters, but it's different than the other one because this one actually moves around. Operators spend lots of time training to identify and count the species of microbes. Identifying filament bacteria is important because it shows operators whether or not the treatment process is functioning smoothly. I met some researchers at IIT who are doing experiments that will now use genetic markers to identify bacteria. It's a really interesting new area, and it would simplify the matter of identifying species and doing counts for operators. This is Filamentous bacteria type 021N. I think you saw a picture in real life of the one before that. So this is one of the crawling ciliates. This is one of the protozoa. And in this one I'm using, oh, I have a pointer here. Right here, this is, you can't see it in the picture because it doesn't show up well, but that's a shiny silk charmeuse, really expensive fabric. And it's mounted on denim. There's a piece of undyed linen and some wool in there. This is yarn that's been manipulated. So the protozoa really aren't, there aren't a lot of them involved in the process of cleaning water, but their importance is that when operators see them, they know everything's working smoothly. This is Vorticella. Don't let Vorticella's darling looks deceive you. This is an enormously competitive life form. It sucks up any food in the vicinity and is highly competitive. This was yet another example of how it's a microbe eat microbe world. I happened to watch a YouTube video about the amoeba, here the bigger one, and the paramecium. It was like the tail of the tortoise and the hare, you know that Aesop fable. So the amoeba moves very, very, very slowly. And the paramecium is banging into it and moving about 1,000,000 miles an hour and kind of being oblivious. And pretty soon, in its own slow way, the amoeba completely engulfs the paramecium, and it was dinner. kind of an interesting tale there. I was pretty relieved that I had stared down the blank canvas, so to speak, and won. But what I couldn't help wondering was all this artistic enthusiasm accurate? Did I get the science right? So with trepidation, I packed up all the work and headed off to the Stickney plant. And I set up all the pieces in a conference room on the corkboards, and I deliberately left off the labels. I had to have an honest assessment of whether or not I'd learned my lessons. So the chief microbiologist walks in, and Tony Glimpf looks around the room. There's a few awkward seconds where I'm like, oh my God, did I get it right? And she just bursts into a smile and says, it's wonderful, and she starts going around the room naming the species. So that was a really, really great moment for me. I felt very relieved. I knew I was on the right track. And I also felt inspired to continue the project and move on to the next area that I wanted to work in. So the next area I worked in was the pump house. Water professionals have learned just how to control the cleaning process. So nature makes it look really, really easy. And in fact, if we depended on nature to clean our wastewater, cities would never have grown to the size they've grown, because it's just too much waste for the natural microbial process to clean our wastewater. So duplicating this process is another story. The equipment is designed to do a complicated job, and controlling the water requires a lot of thoughtful science and engineering. Water is really heavy. Moving water around requires huge amounts of energy, and in fact, energy use is usually the largest line item on any wastewater treatment's budget. That's why the plants are located in a geographical low point of a city, because when you flush your toilet or take a shower or wash your dishes, all that water is flowing towards the treatment plant by gravity. Once the sewer water arrives at the plant, the pumps in the plant, that's one right there in the middle, right here, lift the water to the highest point in the treatment plant, and then again, gravity feeds the water through the treatment process. So my first impression of the pump house at Stickney was overwhelming. The sheer amount of visual information was just was awe-inspiring. And I wondered how I was ever going to make sense of what was happening in that building. But eventually I found in this apparent confusion of pipes and valves and pumps a metaphor for the tangled rivers and streams of my water waste project. Here in the industrial roar of human waste, water obeys the same laws of physics. Gravity is indiscriminate about the contents of water, and I made the connection between the hydrology of the plant and the hydrology of the watershed. The sound of one of these pumps coming online is deafening. The building that I worked in had 6 pumps, and they don't all run at the same time. What happened was one day I was sitting here on this little landing there drawing. And the pump wasn't on, but while I was drawing, there was a huge thunderstorm rolling over the Chicago area and dumping a bunch of rain on. And all of a sudden, the water flowing into the plant increased, so they put another pump online. And the whole building, or the whole area that I'm sitting on starts to shake, and I hear this large rumble as the pump came online. Drawing for hours in this building, I eventually found a sort of creative cocoon underneath my hard hat with my headphones, my earplugs tucked in. And eventually, engineers helped me uncover the language, the color language they use to untangle the pipes. So pipes have different colors for different contents. So yellow is for effluent, silver is for air, brown is for sludge, and blue is for city water. I wanted to use some of those colors in the pieces for the work related to the pump house. They're human sized, these pieces here, meaning they're about 60 inches tall and about 24 inches wide. I wanted, all of the work is not larger than a person, because I want to show that the work is ultimately about human beings. It's our waste that we expect our wastewater officials to clean up. I'm invoking waves and waves of water here using the language of high fashion. The shape of the whole piece is meant to mirror the shape of the aeration tank. The yellow, of course, is the color of the effluent pipes in the plant. And through using extravagant ruffles and a sturdy industrial textile, I'm building a contrast between the heavy-duty treatment process and Poseidon's power. You can see his spear striking the waves, or through the waves of water waves in a powerful gesture. In linking the myth of Poseidon, protector of water, with the people whose job it is to clean our wastewater, I'm disrupting a cultural perception that wastewater is something to flush and forget. I did 3 pieces in this part. I just brought 2 to show you, but again, you can see the rectangular reference to the aeration tank, and it's hard to see, but these little sparkly bits here are my visual stand-in for microbes, and of course we have Poseidon's trident. So the third thing I want to talk to you today about wastewater treatment is what's left after the treated water is siphoned off and put back into the waterway. The solids that settle at the bottom, left behind, need to be treated in a further process that forms that into something called biosolids. And biosolids are literally a form of black gold. But I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that every part of the plant smells sweet. There are certain parts of the plant that do not smell so hot. But stick with me. I want to explain why I think biosolids are so valuable. No one here would think twice about spreading cow manure on farmland or our gardens. All of us know that cow manure replenishes depleted soil. Well, thanks to engineering know-how, our human waste can be used to put nutrients back into soils that are depleted. Biosolids are created through a highly technical process. They are a remarkable material that we can use to enrich the soil with nutrients removed through agricultural production. The organic material in biosolids also improves soil tilth and structure. The kind of high-intensity farming that we practice here in the US uses huge amounts of a chemical called phosphorus. Phosphorus is used by all living cells. We are going to run out of mined sources of phosphorus in a couple of decades. This is a quote from Scientific American. The US is the world's second largest producer of phosphorus after China, but 65% of the amount of phosphorus comes from a single source, a pit mine near Tampa, Florida, which may not last more than a few decades. Meanwhile, nearly 40% of global reserves are controlled by a single country, Morocco, which is sometimes referred to as the Saudi Arabia of phosphorus. Using biosolids is a way to recover phosphorus. We can fertilize our crops using what we already have in abundance. And as long as there's human beings eating, we will have plenty of biosolids. So why not put our waste to work? It's safer and cheaper than land-applied chemical fertilizers, and it improves our soils for future generations. We can keep our chemical and biological resources close to home, and isn't that really what recycling is all about? This is what that drying field, here's the large, you can just see the expanse. I mean, it's just massive, the amount of space and acreage this takes up. But the drying fields, once the biosolids are processed, they have to wait around for 18 months in a drying field like this, and this is what they look like close up, those little piles drying there. So again, I've made a triptych here. There's three, what I'm calling soil sentinels, and they're as tall as I am. I've created three of them because the triptych throughout art history has usually been reserved for sacred subjects. And this is one of the reasons why I like being an artist so much, because who else can get away with elevating poop to the sacred? But you know, you can say so much more with a visual image than you can say sometimes with words. So what I'm doing here is I'm using copper bits and embroidery and fabric and blue, the color blue. The blue runs through all the pieces. It's my visual touchstone for the value of water, even the sewage that arrives at the plant. I'm expressing the layers of soil, and I'm hinting at the time it takes to create soil and Class A biosolids. I'm using embroidery, again, a slow technique that's usually reserved to embellish the robes of royalty and wealth. And this is the second one. You can kind of see my ideas here. I'm hinting at the piles of drying biosolids in the fields, but of course, romanticizing them a bit. This straight blue line in here is a visual reference to the Chicago Canal. Stickney Water Reclamation Facility empties the effluent, the treated water, back into the system in the Chicago Canal. Some people call it a river, but it really isn't a river anymore because it's been engineered to within an inch of its life. So there's many parts of the Chicago Canal that are just ramrod straight. So biosolids can be used in farm fields, they could be used on recreational fields, and this is a recreational field in one of the western suburbs. And this is before the application of biosolids. This is the same field a few months later, top dressed with biosolids. One of the seminars that I attended, Dr. Nick Bass at Ohio State University presented a seminar on research that he did with district personnel and his students in Calumet City. And what they did was they found a really badly degraded plot of soil in Calumet City. What they did was they divided this tract into equal rectangles where they had like an equal plane so that the water could run off, and they measured the amount of water runoff. And in this example, Dr. Bass was trying to test out how much biosolids would be an optimum amount to bring soils back to health. So some of the plots that he used 1 inch of biosolids, 2 inches, 3 inches, and he did the same thing with composting, and then he combined the two together. And of course, there was a control plot where nothing was done to it, because it's science, and a control is really important in a scientific experiment. What they discovered was that they needed both the compost and the biosolids to really help amend the soils, because biosolids are biologically active. Compost is not biologically active, but there are some other substances in there that are really important for soil health. But the two together provide just the right balance of chemicals and nutrients to help establish healthy plant growth. So we humans are really, really tough on our soil, and some of the urban soils can be really badly degraded. But using biosolids with compost is one way to really help bring back soil health. So this is a work in progress expressing the difference between unamended and amended soils. This piece right here, I'm expressing the kind of compression that all the particles undergo when a soil is badly degraded. The soil is dead, there's really no life in there, but more importantly, the soil is so compacted that water can't seep through, and if there's no water, nothing can grow in there. This piece over here took a mind-numbing amount of beading of tiny infinitesimal seed beads, but in it I'm expressing that there's a place where there's breathing room in the soil. There's space for the water to flow through. It's microbially active. There's worms and lots of living things in healthy soil. So I want to accomplish a couple of things with my art project. One is that I want to help people see the value of art in our culture. Lots of people are intimidated by art, and it's funny how almost all of us have a favorite song or a favorite band, but we don't feel the need to have a music degree to appreciate music. Somehow or another, art has become removed from everyday experiences and become very rarefied. I'm excited to use my art in ways that connect people, to show that art can be a useful contribution to issues that matter. Showing my work to engineers and operators and other water professionals was a wonderful experience. I also want to use this project to raise awareness about the value of treated wastewater in discussions about watershed management. Most people flush and forget. I am using beautiful materials and time-consuming processes to show that display a subject that most people think of as unpleasant. Regional water issues are becoming more intense, especially with climate change looming on the horizon. And with fresh water being a fraction of the water available on the planet, we really can't afford to ignore any aspect of fresh water, including wastewater. In one way or another, water will infiltrate my work for a very long time. Water's complexity and the fact that we all depend on it is an exciting and meaningful intersection for me as an artist and a budding citizen scientist. Water, more than any other resource, will define our quality of life in the coming years. I want to use my art to help communities understand why wastewater treatment is so important. I hope that my art sparks intelligent discussions about water management and why art belongs at the center of civic discourses on the important issues of the day. Thank you.
So you've made us mildly self-conscious about our waste this morning. Appreciate that. Actually, that's a good thing. Two things. One is you made one passing reference to the olfactory experience of this whole process. And it's usually, after that, it's probably the first thing that I thought of when trying about this project. Your work seems to almost completely separate from that unpleasant aspect. Is that conscious, or is that something that you work at?
It's a conscious decision for two reasons. One, because personally I was shocked when I went to the Stickney plant. It doesn't smell. It maybe smells a little musty, but the water is so diluted that it isn't like what we flush immediately from our homes. It's just not the same intensity. But also, I'm romanticizing it. I'll be the first to admit. I am trying to put a really good spin on a useful industry that gets a bum rap. There's only one part of the plant that really smells bad, and that's where the beginning of the biosolids process smells a little bad, but those drying fields, they don't smell really bad. I mean, it smells somewhat, you can tell, but you know, cow manure smells. And I've actually had some engineers tell me, oh, we've had this big complaint, we put biosolids down, the neighbors are complaining about the smell. And they go out there and there's a poultry farm or a pig farm next door, and they're like, God, it really stings over there. So it's just that we're not used to the smell of our own waste. Yeah.
I'm impressed by the amount of time that you've put in on this. What period of time have you been working on this project?
Well, let's see. I started actually in 2011 with the permission part, and I didn't get access till March of 2012.
So you've created all this in about 18 months.
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
Wow.
It was pretty intense, because it isn't just like making art that comes out of your own imagination. I had to learn all the science part of it, which was a big, that was kind of a struggle. Rowan. No, but there was some discussion about perhaps doing that. But since I haven't quite shown it publicly yet, I'm just beginning the process of marketing, I'm sure they'll want to. I hope they want to, because that would be kind of fun. Up the back. Oh.
You know, you see these little beading things, and when I do these little things, I have such a hard time imagining them big. Can you talk about the process of how you took tiny, laborious things and you made them into these large panels?
Yeah. I would like to say that my process is really logical and, follows this nice straight line from the sketchbook to the finished piece. But I kind of start 8 pieces at once, and I work on this one till I'm stuck, and then I work on this one till I'm stuck, and then I read a little more, and then I get inspired, or I go talk to somebody and get inspired. So it kind of evolves. So I have this idea, and it's a good thing it evolves, because if I had known it would take like 50 hours of beading to work on that one piece, I probably wouldn't have started it. But once you start it, you have this kind of momentum. So they sort of organically evolve. Thanks, Betsy. Nice to see you too. Thanks for coming. Any other questions? Somebody in here? Yeah?
I was really struck because when you had that moment of showing the microbial, inspired pieces, it seemed like you were very concerned with accuracy,
Yes.
But then in some of the ways you're talking about those pieces, it seems like the expressionist part of it. I mean, so can you talk a little bit about this combination of like the accuracy and,
Yeah, that's really important to me because I wanted to be true to the science. I didn't want to just invent things, although a lot of the project is invented. But with the microbes, for instance, I did not, are there any biologists in the room by any chance? No? Oh, yes, oh good, biologists, because I have to ask you 2 questions at the end. But I didn't even know what a cell septa was. I mean, that's how ignorant I was. I'd forgotten all of my high school biology and chemistry. But each of those bacteria have a particular shape. So, Filamentous bacteria, N21, is a rectangle. It has very defined cell walls. And you can see some of the nucleus in some of the cells much more easily than you can in others. There's a certain proportion in the protozoa between what we call the head, kind of casually, it's not really a head, but like those flower things on the stalk plane. There's certain behavior that they have that I wanted to express. So what I'm aiming for as an artist is to capture enough science to legitimize the pieces, but enough art to entertain you. It's a good question. So biologists, I want to ask you this question. Where did the numbering system come from for bacteria? Because there's 21, no one knows. They've invented it. Somebody probably invented it and they've forgotten. It's been around so long, right?
I'm guessing there's just so many species that giving them each their individual name would take too long.
Yeah, be too confusing to memorize too. Okay, yeah.
I'm fascinated by the sketchbook, and I wonder if in the back of your mind, because that's the one place where you deliberately tie in science to the art. And we see the final art, and we have to reconstruct the back. Are you considering anything to do with the sketchbook itself? I normally don't show my sketchbooks because they're kind of uncensored, but in this particular case, it's a very astute observation. For me, they were so powerful, and they have such an immediacy and a sort of energy to them that I'm thinking that maybe when I show the final work that I could have like a section of the sketchbook pages printed out. Because it might be kind of interesting for scientists to see and for artists to see, because I'm bridging a gap between the two of us.
Yeah, so there tends to be a lack of awareness of sanitary sewage systems and even negative attitudes towards it. Can you talk about, in the future, how you might use your art to break down that?
Thank you. Did I pay you to ask that question? So I don't want to just show the art in some gallery and sell it for a certain amount of dollars. Although, I'm not saying I wouldn't want to sell my art. I do want to earn a living from it. But I wanted to serve a higher purpose. So what I'm hoping for is that it will provide a meeting ground. So that, for instance, if there's a venue like a museum or a library or something, and you have the show opening, there could be programming around this to bring in the microscopes and have the biologists show exactly what they look for in the process, the treatment process, and show what kind of, where the species are. We could have hydrologists and engineers explain the value of pumps and why valves are so important in the process of moving water around the plant. So I'm really hoping that the artwork is, again, a bridge to the scientists, to ecologists, to explain the relationship between treatment plants and watersheds. Because quite honestly, we would not be here. You would not have Rock Island to be the size that it is, or Chicago is the size it is, without wastewater treatment. We would have died from waterborne epidemics. So we really can't go back to a time, when ecologists want to turn back, some people say, okay, well, let's take the environmental issue all the way back to before when human beings invaded the land. You can never get the water to behave that way again. We can never divorce ourselves from the watershed in the reality of an urban life. So this idea of wastewater and watershed management is really intertwined, and that's what I'm hoping the project will do, is help people wake up a little, and understand that when you flush the toilet, it just doesn't go away. Somebody has to deal with it. Somebody has to clean up the mess. These are great questions. What was that? Say again? Okay, I guess that's it, isn't it? Thanks again so much for inviting me.